I stood in the sunlit kitchen, the quiet hum of the refrigerator echoing around us like a silent jury. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, lips curved into that practiced smirk, just enough amusement, just enough condescension. "You'll come around," she said, smiling like she'd already won. She thought I couldn't see past her little performance, but I did. And I didn't just step back, I vanished. I didn't yell. I didn't shout. I didn't scramble to correct her. I just watched her, the way she always watched me during these moments, eyes narrowed, jaw firm, every inch of her posture saying she ruled this house. The world held its breath while she delivered her verdict. Something inside clicked, as if a circuit I didn't know existed had been switched on. I realized those words, softly spoken but clearly victorious, marked the end of whatever I thought we were. Not that day. But the threshold had been crossed. The clock started ticking. I noticed how casually she folded her arms, how her smirk softened into something almost smugly gentle. It was a nurse's victory after administering a silent shot. She believed she'd disarmed me. But no. Disarming me would have meant I stayed. I didn't. Without a word I turned away, moving toward the fridge. I opened it, staring at the bottles inside as though they held answers. None did. The hum of the appliance became deafening, drowning out the rest of the world, but I welcomed it. It matched the rush in my head, the realization that nothing was the same anymore. I grabbed a bottle of water and twisted the lid off, deliberately slow. I didn't sip. Instead, I raised it to my lips and paused. My finger trembled just a fraction. That's how much I felt her words echoing in my chest. And yet I didn't respond to her victory, because this was mine now. She stepped forward. Her tone was softer, diffused with that practiced calm she used when she wanted me to believe the fight was over. "Come on, talk to me." I kept my eyes on the water, even as liquids slid into my mouth. I swallowed deliberately, chest tightening. "I heard what you said." She smiled again, no heat, no regret. "Of course you did." I placed the bottle down with a quiet click. I meant to own the space. "It matters," I said, voice low. "That line." I paused, measured. "Because I'm not coming around." She laughed softly, like critiquing a friend's bad joke. "Oh, you always say that." But it wasn't the same this time. I pulled my phone from my pocket, flicking my thumb across the screen until it went dark. It didn't ring. No contacts lit up. I didn't even respond. Instead, I turned away again, toward the sliding door that led to the balcony. The light outside was bright, almost mocking. She followed, leaning into the frame. The afternoon breeze stirred her hair, bringing out that familiar scent, something floral, expensive. It used to comfort me. Now it only reminded me how thoroughly I'd been fooled. "You're doing that thing again," she said, voice calm as if pointing out a misplaced fork. I turned just enough to catch her eye, letting the breeze play across my face. "That thing?" "The disappearing act." Her tone was casual, dismissive. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. I didn't walk forward. Not yet, but I vanished. I held her gaze. "Maybe I need time," I said. And that was true. Time to figure out what happened when I let someone sneak control into our marriage disguised as leadership. Time to decide if I wanted to come around, or walk away entirely. She pursed her lips, eyes locked on me. The smirk was gone. Now I saw something new, surprise. Slight worry, maybe. The realization that this wasn't just a bump. This was a crossroad, and I'd already chosen a direction. The sun shifted, shadows dancing across her face, sharpening the lines I'd learned to ignore. She blinked, as if testing reality. I didn't break the stare. I didn't crack the tension. Because the victory she thought she'd claimed? That was the final move that broke something in me. And I walked away, though no one outside saw it yet. Not truly. That moment I vanished. I didn't sleep that night. She did, of course, sprawled comfortably across the bed like nothing had shifted. That smug little moment in the kitchen had settled her. She believed the world was back to normal, as it always was after these Cold War quarrels. But I lay there watching the ceiling fan spin, trying to pinpoint when I stopped being a husband and became a subject in her private game. It wasn't rage keeping me awake. It was recognition. Patterns I'd ignored for years clicked into place like puzzle pieces I never wanted to examine too closely. The apologies that never came from her side. The rewrites of reality mid-argument. How she could take something I said in earnest and, by the end of the conversation, have me believing I'd been insensitive, irrational, ungrateful. And I believed it. I swallowed my doubts and said I was sorry. Again and again. I'd always told myself it was strength, to bend, to compromise, to be emotionally intelligent. That's what she called it when I backed down. But I see it differently now. It wasn't compromise. It was conditioning. She called it leadership. But she wasn't leading. She was corralling. I got out of bed around 2 a.m. The room was dark except for the glow of her phone charging on the nightstand. I didn't plan it. I didn't even feel sneaky. I just reached for it with that same numb clarity I'd had all day. The lock screen was off. No password. She never needed one. Why would she, when I'd been trained to trust? I started with her messages, not looking for anything, just following a feeling. It didn't take long. Her sister. Top of the thread. A short exchange, casual. Too casual. Her sister had written, "Don't worry, he'll fall back in line like always." And she'd replied with a single emoji, the face with tears from laughter. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. That emoji hit harder than any confession. It was an entire summary of our relationship in one mocking curl of pixels. She didn't fear my disapproval. She laughed at my belief in fairness, at my hope that this marriage could be collaborative. I was a recurring punchline in a script she recited to her inner circle. And I had never seen it, because I hadn't wanted to. I scrolled through more threads. Small things. Complaints dressed as jokes. Eye-rolling at things I'd said, decisions I'd questioned, emotions I'd shown. He's being sensitive again. Thinks he has veto power now, lol. Tried to assert himself over vacation plans. Adorable. It was all there. I set the phone down as gently as I'd picked it up. My hands were steady. My chest cold. I didn't feel anger, not yet. I felt distance, like I'd already left. My body was still sitting there on the bed, but some other version of me, older, colder, watching from a ledge above it all, had already cut the line between who I thought she was and who she really showed herself to be. She shifted in her sleep and mumbled something, half smiling into the pillow. I stared at her. It hit me then. This wasn't a relationship. This was chess. And she assumed I only played defense. But she was wrong. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. My reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar, tired but sharp, awake in more ways than one. I sipped slowly, planning nothing, just letting reality settle into my system like a slow anesthetic. There was a time I would have talked to her about this, told her I'd read her phone, asked for context, let her explain. But not anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an operating system, and I had no interest in debugging it. By Monday morning, I made a silent promise to myself. No more arguments, no more attempts at fairness. From now on, every smile, every soft word, every romantic gesture would be reconnaissance or camouflage. She taught me the rules. I just never accepted I was in a game, until now. I started with the essentials. A personal bank account, opened quietly during lunch hour, in a branch she'd never stepped foot in. I kept the deposit low, just enough to test the waters, to verify the statements would be digital only. I named the account something generic, something she'd skim past if it ever showed up. But it wouldn't. I made sure of that. Next, I filed a request to reroute all sensitive mail, medical records, bank notices, legal correspondence, to a new P.O. box near my office. The woman behind the counter didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. It was the first interaction in days that didn't feel rehearsed or calculated. At home, I made dinner. Her favorite, pan-seared salmon, white wine reduction, a salad with the dressing she always pretended to dislike until it came from a restaurant. She raised an eyebrow when she walked in and saw the table set. "What's the occasion?" I smiled and shrugged. "Just wanted a calm evening." And she bought it. Of course she did. To her, peace meant victory. A silent man meant a defeated man. And I gave her all the signs she needed. I even let her win small things, TV choices, weekend plans, household purchases. Each one a calculated reinforcement of her illusion. She was so caught up in winning the battles, she didn't realize the war had changed. When she went to bed early that night, smug and affectionate, I stayed up and logged out of every shared device in the house. Laptops, tablets, the smart speaker. I changed the passwords to my email and revoked access to location tracking. I moved silently, efficiently, like a man wiping his fingerprints off a life he was preparing to exit. The next week, I signed a short-term lease on a studio in another city. Officially, a business convenience for a new contract I claimed was a bit outside town. She barely blinked. In fact, she nodded approvingly. Glad to see you taking initiative, she said over breakfast, sipping her coffee like a queen bestowing favor. I nodded back, hiding the weight behind my eyes. Felt like time. What I didn't say was that the studio came pre-furnished, utilities included, with a private parking garage and a month-to-month clause that made it the perfect escape hatch. She thought I was leaning in. I was leaning out. I started stashing key documents, passport, birth certificate, backup bank cards, in a small fireproof case I kept locked in my car's trunk. Not a dramatic move, just a simple precaution, in case I had to move quickly. By the second weekend, I noticed a shift. She was relaxed, triumphant, even. I was being better, more affectionate, more agreeable. She bragged to her sister during a call I overheard while organizing files. He finally gets it. Just needed a little pressure. I smiled from the hallway. It wasn't hate I felt. It was distance, like watching someone misread the map while I already had the route memorized. At night, when she curled into me and whispered things she used to withhold, I let her. Not because I believed any of it, but because I wanted the mask to stay on until I no longer had to look at it. Kindness can be a trap, but it can also be a farewell. And mine was already underway. It started with a strange notification on her tablet. She'd left it unlocked while getting ready for a dinner party, music playing from her phone in the bathroom. I wasn't looking to dig that night, but it buzzed, lit up, and on instinct I glanced. A group chat. The name caught me. Relationship strategy. I shouldn't have clicked. I did anyway. What I found wasn't flirting or infidelity, not at first. It was worse in its own way. It was a forum, a gathering of women discussing behavioral management like it was household budgeting. They didn't speak about love. They spoke about systems, about control, and she was active. Her messages read like excerpts from a manual. Don't react emotionally. Reframe everything until he questions his logic. Another. If he resists, make it a moral failure. That always works. There were dozens. Not angry rants or venting between friends. These were instructions, scripts, tactics. One thread went on for days about how to dismantle a partner's decision-making confidence. It wasn't passion that flooded my chest. It was a strange, suffocating chill. I scrolled further, past screenshots, past sarcastic commentary. There were even audio clips, recordings, some anonymous, some hers. I clicked on one labeled simply, Tuesday LOL. Her voice came through, casual, confident, unmistakably amused. He actually said he wanted a say in the budget. I mean, adorable. I let him feel heard for 10 minutes, then brought up that time he overspent on that stupid hiking gear. You know, consequences. The room blurred slightly. I sat on the edge of the bed, tablet still in hand, listening to her mock the small things I thought had been sincere negotiations. That hiking trip, I'd spent months planning it, wanting us to reconnect. She'd gone but sulked the whole weekend. I'd blamed myself, thought I'd missed something. Turns out, she'd just been making sure I stayed within her lines. There were more. Little moments I'd assumed were genuine conflict resolution, exposed now as rehearsed performances. And then I found the folder. It was stored in her personal drive, synced by accident to the tablet, I guessed, buried beneath layers of shopping receipts and calendar backups. A single folder titled, How to Win. Inside were PDFs, articles, saved screenshots from anonymous forums, notes, highlighted quotes, even pie charts from some relationship coaching seminar she must have attended alone. I scrolled through a file marked, Tone Management. In it, she'd listed phrases she'd found most effective for making me back down. Next to them, notes on when to use them, what expressions to pair with them. It was grotesque in its coldness. Not rage, not vengeance, strategy. And yet none of it prepared me for what came next. The old flame. A man I vaguely remembered from her college years, someone she once described as immature but charming. I'd thought nothing of it when she mentioned him offhand at a reunion 2 years ago. Now I saw the texts, spread across 6 months, sparse, careful, but undeniable. No overt romance, just nostalgia, suggestion, phrases like, You always saw me differently, and some things are worth waiting for. She never mentioned me by name, but it didn't matter. She was testing the water, planting seeds. He responded in kind, light flirtation, vague language, the kind of messages cowards send when they want deniability. She hadn't physically gone to him, not yet. But mentally? She'd left months ago. And I sat there holding proof that she hadn't just grown tired of us, She'd studied me, mocked me, and prepared an upgrade. The pain wasn't sharp. It was deep, like stepping into a cold lake and realizing too late that it never gets warmer, only deeper. I closed the tablet. My breath slowed. I didn't panic. I didn't rage. I just knew. There was nothing left to fight for. Nothing to salvage. Whatever love she once gave had calcified into performance. Whatever trust one once offered had been auctioned off to strangers in a chat room. And she, sleeping down the hall, dreaming God knows what, still thought the game was hers. But I'd seen the board now. And I wasn't playing anymore. She left for brunch around 11 a.m. I watched from the window as her car pulled out of the driveway, the same calculated ease in her posture, the practiced smile she wore for her friends. The moment her taillights vanished, I turned from the window and walked back into the bedroom. Everything had already been arranged. Documents boxed, laptop scrubbed, keys placed carefully on the counter. No panic. No last-minute doubts. I moved through the house like a ghost collecting memories. The framed photo on the mantel. Our anniversary in Charleston. I'd carried it room to room once, believing the smiles in that image proved we'd made it through the worst. Now I saw the look in her eyes differently. Not warmth, calculation. Her hand resting on my chest had been a claim, not affection. I took it down, left the frame, removed the photo, slipped it into a drawer she never opened. By noon, the apartment looked nearly untouched, furniture still in place, kitchen spotless. Nothing that would suggest a departure, until she opened the closet. Half the clothes gone. My favorites, the ones she used to tease me for wearing, missing. The safe was empty. Birth certificate, passport, that small gold watch from my grandfather, all gone. She'd notice eventually, but by then it would be too late. I placed a single envelope on the bed. Inside, a typed note. No apology, no explanation, just a closing statement. You smiled like it was checkmate. You forgot I could flip the board. I stood there one last time, in the bedroom where she'd once promised to grow old with me. The air felt still, a hollow kind of peace, like standing in the eye of a storm you've already left behind. I walked out without looking back. In my car, parked 2 blocks over, everything was packed. Suitcase, documents, flash drive with everything I'd uncovered. New phone, activated that morning. SIM card registered under a clean number. No forwarding address. By the time she came back from her mimosa-fueled brunch, I was 3 hours away, keys to my new place in my pocket. The apartment was modest, sterile, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, I exhaled without checking her expression. I didn't block her right away. I waited. I watched the calls come in. 1, then 3, then 10. I saw the text messages, first confused, then concerned, then carefully crafted to pull me back in. Are you okay? We need to talk. If this is a game, I'm not playing. You're being cruel. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so hollow. When the final call came in and the voicemail started playing, her voice frantic now, just a little shrill, I pressed the button and ended it mid-sentence. Then I blocked her. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was leaving. And for someone like her, that was the one thing she never planned for. The first wave hit 2 days after I vanished. She started with my phone, of course. Calls, texts, voice messages, one after the other. They rang out into silence, bouncing off a number that no longer existed. Her first message to my work email came on day 3, laced with concern and subtle accusation. I don't know what's going on, but disappearing isn't the answer. We need to be adults about this. Adults. As if I hadn't spent years being the only one acting like one. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the second message. By the end of the week, she'd moved to our friends. Well, our, in name only. Most were people she'd absorbed into her orbit over the years, connections she curated. I knew how it would go, the tearful recounting, the abandonment, the shock. But something unexpected happened. Some reached out to me. Not many. Not with sympathy, just quiet respect. A few wrote things like, I don't know the full story, but I understand needing space. One friend I hadn't seen in 6 months sent a simple line. You finally left, huh? That told me more than I needed. The mask she wore for the world was thinner than she realized. I stayed quiet. No updates. No counters to her story. Silence was my only reply, and it began to spread. People who'd once responded to her with comfort now left her on read. Her social feed turned quieter. Pictures became less frequent. Captions more forced. That ever-present smile? Still there, but strained. She emailed again after 2 weeks. This time the tone had changed. No longer concerned, now bitter. If you think this is how grown men behave, running away like some kind of martyr, then I was right about you. Still trying to control the narrative. Still assuming I needed her interpretation of events to define reality. But the real damage wasn't what I'd done, it was what I hadn't given her. An audience. Without me present to rebut, to validate, to argue, her script fell apart. Her story needed a villain to be compelling. And I had disappeared too cleanly, too completely. The silence became a mirror she couldn't stand to face. She tried family next. My parents were cautious, polite. I'd prepped them a week before I left. Not with details, just enough to keep them calm. There's been a lot under the surface, I'd told my mother. But I'm handling it. You'll understand later. My father had said only, just make sure you're proud of how you leave, not just that you left. So when she called them, they didn't panic. They didn't scold. They said I was safe. And then they hung up. By week 4, the cracks were wide enough for anyone to see. A mutual friend forwarded me a message from her, something she'd accidentally sent to the wrong group chat. He thinks this silence is strength. It's just cruelty. But it's fine. I'll rebuild. Alone. Even in her unraveling, the branding remained. But the people she once held with charm and charisma began to notice the repetition, the performative sadness, the thinly veiled contempt under every "woe is me." Some pulled away. Others stayed silent. And me? I rebuilt in peace. Quiet, methodical, slow. I changed legal documents, met with attorneys, made sure she had no way to access anything tied to me. I checked surveillance cameras on the storage unit where my personal files now lived. I changed passwords monthly. Nothing careless. No trace. She was still watching, I could feel it, hoping I'd break the silence, appear on some platform, give her an opening. But I gave her nothing. Because that was all I ever owed her, in the end. Nothing. 3 months after I vanished, a letter arrived at her door. Official, clean, legally precise. Divorce paperwork. Filed through my attorney in a city she'd never set foot in. Every page reviewed, every clause prepared. I'd waived any claim to alimony or shared assets. I didn't want a dime of her money, and I didn't want a conversation. I wanted silence, permanence, severance. But attached to the formal packet was a personal letter. I didn't use harsh language. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I printed out screenshots instead. Quotes from her, relationship strategy, group chat, phrases she once laughed about with strangers, now typed in black and white, stacked like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb. Next to one quote, "He thinks fairness means equal say. That's so cute." I'd simply written, "This is who you became." Beneath another, "Resets take time. They often resist before they give up." I added, "I didn't fall in line." I left the room. No signature at the bottom. No dramatic farewell. Just one final page with 2 sentences. I didn't come around. I disappeared. And I'm not circling back. I didn't hear her reaction. I didn't need to. But I knew it wouldn't be tears. It wouldn't be rage. It would be something worse for her. Silence. Because for once, she had no script. No audience. No power. There was no one to convince, no story to spin. Just the quiet weight of a man she thought was a pawn stepping off the board entirely. The consequences didn't unfold like an explosion. They arrived like winter. Slow. Icy. Inescapable. I heard, through the occasional thread, that some of her closest allies had gone quiet. That the charm didn't land the same way it used to. That the laughter didn't reach the back of the room anymore. I never celebrated. I didn't gloat. But I watched. Not out of bitterness. Out of closure. She had built her identity on controlling the narrative. But in the end, her most effective weapon, my willingness to engage, was gone. And in its absence, the truth grew louder than she ever expected. I didn't destroy anything. I just turned off the lights and walked out quietly. And when I stepped outside into the cold, into the unknown, I finally felt the one thing I hadn't felt in years. Free.